Today we're going to be painting our own analogous geode using wet-on-wet painting techniques. When you get your piece of paper today, on the front of your paper vertically, write your name on the bottom right corner, and on the back, write your class. We're going to be painting near the center of our paper in the shape of an oval. At your table, your painting tray looks like this. You'll have a water basket with your water cup filled halfway, a paintbrush, a towel, salt, and your own paint palette. Now, hopefully you didn't forget, our paintbrush is like a ballerina and we need to make sure we take good care of it. When you're washing out your brush, slowly and gently wash your brush out in the water, not too fast or you're gonna splash the water everywhere. You're also going to see a small cup full of salt. Today, you should only be using 2 pinches of salt in your watercolor. You will also have your own watercolor palette that says your table color. You are responsible for keeping your own paint palette clean today. Before we begin painting on our paper, we need to make sure our dry watercolors are awake and ready to use. So go ahead and wake the 3 analogous colors that you will be using today in your painting. I'm dropping in a few drops of water into each color. If you accidentally mix up the colors, no big deal. It's super easy to fix and clean up. Taking a clean brush, you'll want to use the hairs of the brush into the color and soak it up like a sponge. What I'm doing is gently turning my brush around in the dirty color. What you don't want to do is scrape up the paint because then you'll be wasting paint. Our brush should pretty much be wet the whole time we're painting today. The only time you'll need to use a towel is at the very end of art when you're done painting to dry off your brush. If you notice your painting water gets a little too brown, muddy, or just plain old dirty, go ahead and pick one person at your table today to head over to the sink to refill it with clean water halfway. Taking a pretty wet brush, you're going to be painting water in the shape of an oval near the center of your paper. Make sure you're doing this step kind of quickly. You don't want to put too much water to where it looks like there's a whole swimming pool on your paper. That might end up with a mess. Out of the 3 analogous colors, I'm going to choose the middle color, which is not too light or not too dark, so that's green for me. Using only the tippy toes of my brush, I'm dropping the paint color into the wet oval, and it will slowly do its magic. You will see that it starts to naturally spread on its own with the wet water that we previously painted. I'm filling in the middle with my lightest analogous color, which is yellow, and I'm filling it into the center. The darkest color should really only be placed on the outer edges of your geode. For our wet on wet and salt technique, you'll want to work kind of quickly because everything needs to stay wet for it to work. Grabbing 2 pinches of salt, sprinkle it on top of the wet areas of your painting. Here's another example of a geode painting, but I chose 3 different analogous colors. Your artwork is going to be pretty wet today, and there might be even a small puddle of water. You'll need to make sure that you bring your painting with 2 hands on your messy mat slowly and carefully to the drying rack. If you notice that there's a swimming pool of water, please make sure you raise your hand and ask for help. Make sure you bring back your messy mat and leave it at the end of your table. Look closely to see how I'm carefully sliding my artwork into the white drying rack attached to the wall. Your table is clean and quiet at the end of art class, then I will give you a towel to clean off your hands and the table. Our geode paintings are finally dry, but there's some leftover salt. Find a trash can around the studio and gently and carefully over the trash can, brush off the salt with your hands. We're going to be using a gold metallic marker to outline the edges of our geode. Carefully trace as close to the painted edge as possible. Remember, geodes are natural found objects. They do not grow in a perfect straight line. So your edge should kind of look like a zigzag line or kind of a wavy line. Try to create some thinner edges and some thicker edges in your geode. In art, we call this line weight. How thick or thin is your line? After you're done outlining the edges of your geode, you'll want to add a few wavy and curvy lines on the inside of your geode. Remember, you want to make it look as natural as possible, so don't overdo this step with the gold marker. When you're finished with the gold metallic marker, make sure the cap is back on tight and place it back in the cup, marker tip facing down. Now, using your ruler, you're going to want to create about 8 to 10 sections in the background of your geode. I have 8 spaces in my background. We're going to be filling in these spaces with Zentangles. Zentangles is basically just a fancy art word for repeated lines and patterns. You can think of your own Zentangles or patterns for today, but if you need some help on ideas, you can borrow a Zentangle book. These books are in the back of the studio on the countertop. Please make sure you put it back correctly when you're done. In each space, try to fill it in with a different Zentangle. In each space, there's a line or a shape that is repeated over and over until the space is filled in. To create some emphasis in your Zentangles, which means to make it stand out, you can make the line weight thicker or thinner, or you can even color in some of the lines or shapes. This process will take a while, so I do not expect you to finish this step today. Your hand even might start to cramp up a little bit from all the intense Zentangling. At the end of art, make sure you turn your artwork into your folder.